And welcome back. This is Alden Antonucci with Extreme Power Hour Podcast, where I've got a great friend of mine, Seth, and also another friend of mine, Chris, where we have a really fun, interesting podcast, this Power Hour, where we're going to talk about this guy. Everyone knows it as a debt note or a dollar bill. Well, on the back of the dollar bill, we have a pyramid right here where Seth came to explain a little bit more about the history and this Eye of Providence specifically. Take away, Seth.
Well, I don't know if it's specifically the Eye of Providence, but as I show this to you right here, the little eye in the triangle, not going into the total details, but it's basically, it's a spiritual belief, meaning the God is watching over you, or the watchful eye of God. You can think of it that way.
Right.
A lot of times people can sometimes think of it as the Eye of Horus, which then is a kind of a Egyptian story, mythology, historical things, which then leads me into one of the Egyptian gods that I was asked to talk about today, which is Osiris. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking about it from more of a mythological aspect. There's a person across from me, Chris, who also is familiar with this more on probably on the mythological side, but also more so on the historical side. So we'll have a little bit of back and forth on definitions and how things transpired and things like that.
Well, super interesting. And a lot of people have heard Osiris. And obviously, like you're saying, you're going to kind of approach it from a mythological standpoint. Chris is going to come at it with more of a historical standpoint. Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of the day, we're all trying to understand the myths, the legends, the conspiracies, the dramas behind Osiris, which theoretically is the father of Horus, which was obviously the Eye of Horus on the dollar bill, the Eye of Providence. And so, Chris, what's your take from that with Horus on the dollar bill?
So my take is that's not Horus on the dollar bill.
Oh.
That is actually the evil eye, which, of course, if you go to Egypt, or the Egyptians would have the evil eye, which is the blue, and the Turks also follow the same. The Greeks, the blue with the black dot in the center. It was to represent the all-seeing eye, the evil eye.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Osiris, or not Osiris, but Horus and Thoth, there were multiple different eyes. And then, of course, the Babylonian eye is the all-seeing eye. Yeah. So that's my take is that it's the Babylonian version of the Egyptian Eye of Horus.
Right.
Yeah.
And so pulling back now, Osiris. Let's refer more in Osiris in those respects.
Okay. Well, Osiris, just a quick touch on the exact origin of him would be, from what I understand, is that you have to go back to the very beginning of the Anunnaki, what is known as the Anunnaki. We from the sky come to heaven or come to earth or something like that. And just a bunch of people that were three large beings, Anu, Enki and Enlil, Anu being the father, Enki and Enlil being the brothers. And anyways, some people think that Enki is Osiris. And then when we get to Osiris and his brother Set, not to be confused with Seth, because back then they did not have a th sound. They only had a t or a s sound. So Set, he was Enlil. So get that out of the way. Now, Osiris was known as the supreme god of the underworld. But before he got into being the supreme god of the underworld, we have to step back again to when Ra, when he was the supreme god of the world, of the earth, and then he faded into the heavens. Before that happened, there was a god by the name of Geb, and then a goddess, which is the god of the earth, and then Nut, which is the goddess of the skies or heaven. And Ra, being all knowing and knew the future in some cases, knew that if Nut bore any children, that those children would overrule Ra and his all the work that he had done. So Ra cursed Nut that she could not have any children for any time of the year. That meant any day of the year. So she was very upset. She went to Thoth, who is known as the god of wisdom and writing and history and magic as well. A lot of different things that he was language. But anyway, so went to him, and he devised a scheme that he would go to Khonsu, which is the sun god, and played checkers, or not sun god, sorry, the moon god, and played checkers with him. And Thoth kept on winning, and every time that Thoth would win, part of Khonsu's illuminating light, because at that point all he was just a luminary thing, that it would get less and less light, and he would lose light each game, and Thoth would gain light. And so this went on for a while, and then Khonsu finally said, no, this is enough. I can't handle it anymore. So Thoth gathered up all the light that he could, and he was able to, with his magic, create 5 extra days. And at this point, a year was 360 days because of the 360-degree circle. And these 5 days were used as holidays and festival days and special days. And because of this, Nut was able to have children. And so the theory goes, or the story goes, that on the first day, Arveris was born, and he was associated with art, music, and poetry. And then the next day, Osiris was born, and then the next day was Set, and then the next day was Isis, and then the next day was Nephthys. Isis and Nephthys were sisters, Set and Osiris brothers, and Arveris was also the brother. We don't know much about Arveris after this point. I don't. So Osiris and Isis, being brothers and sisters, and Set and Nephthys were also brothers and sisters. Back in those days, it was okay to get married, so each of them married their respective brother-sister thing. So Osiris and Isis were married. So at this time on the world, and this is kind of going to go into an aside here, because I want to jump into the fact that the group of people that were living at this time were actual Homo sapiens, which some people refer to as Neanderthals, but they didn't have the kind of gene connection that we have. So Isis was, and I don't know exactly how, and some people say that in a birthing station in Abydos in Egypt is where it all happened, but she, and with the help of others, they took the Homo sapien and some of their genes, they spliced it, add some telomeres, which adds a certain amount of life, and then that was implanted into Isis, and then 10 months later, she gave birth to the first Homo sapien, which is what we know as man today.
So that'd be like Adam?
And she called it Adama. So you can get the Adam, you can figure it out. Some people say Adamu, but having that be the case, all the other, and then she was like the first one, and all the other births after that created that civilization that Osiris and Isis took over. And before, as I said, before that, they were all cannibals. They, just cannibalism was rampant. Everything.
At what year was this?
I don't know.
Chris, what's your take on the
historical aspect?
Historical aspect of this.
On the historical aspect, so if I might add,
yeah.
So
please.
So the gods. I'm going to start right off with the gods' names. So Isis was actually called Isis. It was transformed when the Greeks actually took the gods of Egypt and put them into their own canon. So Isis became the Greek version of Isis. Her name is actually Isis, and she's associated with the snake or the cobra, which she actually brought from her father. So, and there are several different versions of mythology associated with the gods. That's one version of the mythology of the gods. But another one, of course, so the names, going back to the names, Isis is Isis. Her Greek name is Isis. Osiris is Osir. And then Set's name, actual Egyptian name, is Setek. And Nephthys is Nephthys. And then Anubis didn't change within the Greek. So a lot of them did change. For instance, Horus is actually not Horus. That's a Greek version of his name. His actual name is Hor, or Heru. So
cool.
Which, of course, is associated with the two horizons. Heru, the Ru, so the Ru of Ra.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and in one of the myths, Ta is the father. Another one, Amun-Ra, is the predecessor of, so the first incarnation of Ra. So Amun-Ra is not the first, he's the secondary when he becomes the god of the sun. Ra is his actual physical form or human form. And then, of course, you have Nefertum, which is the lotus in which he rose from Ta, the earth. So like the Kartush.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which is the landmass on an island. An island being the universe before it actually had anything. So like Never Neverland. So, yeah.
Oh, so it's all tied together.
Well, when you said change the name to Isis, it also kind of runs right into where I was just going to, being the civilization that Osiris and Isis took over. Some people would say that that's the generation of Isis or a generation of Isis, which you can kind of contract to Genesis in a weird way.
Fascinating.
So, moving along, Osiris and Isis had this wonderful, created this wonderful civilization, and now here's where Set comes into play. He's a little on the jealous side. He doesn't get to do much, as far as I know, except create chaos, which is what he is. Also, because he is the god of chaos, I'm going to jump back to when he was in the womb. One of the stories is that his birth was not of a normal birth. He wanted to get out so fast that he literally crawled and clawed his way out of the stomach or out of the womb to get out. So that's kind of a weird one, but kind of makes sense if you're the god of chaos. So he was jealous of that. And in the meantime, another story is that Nephthys, Set's wife, wanted to sleep with Osiris, so she dressed up like Isis, and they were very similar, being sisters. So it wasn't that hard. They ended up sleeping together. And this is where Nephthys gets impregnated with a child, and that child's name is Anubis. And Anubis is also associated with the god of mummification and other underworldly things. Let's see. So because of the adultery and the other issues that he has, he was just kind of a messed up guy. He plots a way to get rid of Osiris. And so he along with 72 cohorts, create this elaborate sarcophagus that's very ornate and inlaid and very pretty, very cool looking, apparently. And he sneaks into Osiris's room, Set does, and he gets the physical measurements, so he knows exactly everything. And then he makes the box, as these people make the box specific for that. Then he throws this elaborate party. And these 272 conspirators, along with the Queen of Ethiopia, was also there. Just to throw that in. But this party, at the end of this party, Set says, well, here's the pièce de résistance type of thing. In this sarcophagus is here, and if your body fits it, you get it. It's called play a game of who can fit in the sarcophagus. So everybody, some people are too big, some people are too skinny, tall, whatever. Nobody fit. And then either Osiris decided to do it lastly, or Set said, well, you haven't done it, Osiris. Why don't you try it? Regardless of how, he gets in there. And just before he says, this kind of fit, and boom, Set slams shut the top. They seal it, molten lead, and then they take it into the Nile and dump it in the Nile. Meanwhile, then Isis, who is, the love and the wife, and she's really, when she finds out about this, she gets very distraught, and she searches all over. And have you seen my husband? Da da da. And nobody has seen her. Finally, she comes across some kids who did see her or saw the box. And so she went and she found that this box landed in the land of Biblios, I believe is the name of it, and entrenched in the base of a tamarisk tree. And so this tamarisk tree was in this land that apparently is a really cool tree that was one of a kind, maybe because Osiris is inside, who knows. And so Isis finds this out and then ingratiates herself into the king and queen's entourage or whatever, household. And at the right time, apparently, because she has magic, she's also known as, in this myth, she's known as the goddess of fertility and magic and healing. And so when the whole group of people there found out that the king and queen's child was sick, there's two stories. Either she healed him, or she says she would grant him immortality, and then he decided that they didn't want it. Regardless, what do you want in exchange for either the immortality or to heal? And she said, I want that sarcophagus. So long story short, she takes the sarcophagus to make the deal. She takes it out with her magic. She breaks the seal and takes his dead body out and puts it into the reeds. And she wants to revive him. Her magic is not good enough, so she decides that she wants to ask Thoth. So she goes to try and finds Thoth. And I think Anubis, too, also helps out. But in the meantime, while she's off doing that, Set gets word of all this, finds out where he is, chops him up into, here's another story. A lot of people think it's either 14 pieces or 42 pieces. There is I think it's a Greek author by the name of Plutarch. You've heard of him, I believe.
Plutarch,
yeah. And a lot of people go more or less on his versions because they're more consistent, apparently. And he says 14. So 14 pieces gets distributed all around Egypt, all over Egypt.
Did Egypt have boundaries at this point? Is it Egypt that we know today? Or
I don't know. It was actually called Chem originally, and then Chemet, and then, but I think Chem was the name for black soil because it was very fertile, the black soil, and then Kemet, or Chemet, if you use the Arabic word, I think it's pronounced that way. But that's where I don't know exactly what the border lines are, but they'll just say Egypt is.
So basically now Osiris is distributed
throughout
the fertile
area.
Valley, basically, at
we'll
that point.
Call it that. And so she collects, and this is where she transforms into a hawk and flies around with her hawk vision, and she scouts out 13 in pieces, and she gathers 13 pieces, the 14th being the phallus that she could not find. That one was thrown into the sea, where some people say a catfish ate it. Some other people say that there's 3 other different types of fish that could have eaten it. Sea bream was one, and pike was another one. But apparently these fish also, when you ate them, created hallucinogenic feelings. So I don't know if it was that, but they added that these fish eat. Never mind. So that part was not with the rest of him. So she gathered Thoth again with Anubis, together with all their magic. They brought him back to an existence, not back to life. She said that he was dead for so long that he had to stay in the underground or in the underworld and could not go into the up above anymore. So he became, at that point, the supreme ruler of the supreme god of the underworld. And so with her magic, they were all very upset because she had to leave. And their last embrace before that was that she crafted a golden phallus, somehow attached it to him. They had sex, and then she had Horus from that. And so that's basically the story of Osiris there. It can there goes into Horus, and Isis takes Horus, and then after many years of being trained as a warrior, then battles Set, who is at this point the ruler of Egypt, because he takes over because Osiris is gone. And that kind of goes into a new story of Horus and Set and a bunch of other things. But if you want to take Osiris down a step into the underworld, where you've heard stories when you die, your heart gets weighed to that of a feather, as far as whether you've lived a good life or a bad life, a sinful life or a good life. It kind of kept those people, what I'm about to say, it kind of kept them just going one way, the non-sinful way, because once you died, apparently this is what happens. You get greeted by Anubis, who weighs your sins your heart to the feather, and if your heart weighs equal or lighter than the feather, then you get sent to Osiris, who then you're in the afterlife, and there's this whole Egyptian afterlife mythology of what happens there, which is apparently a good thing. Or if your heart is heavier than the feather, then your heart is being eaten by a being called, I believe it's Amit, with Amittamut, Amit. I don't know exactly. It has a crocodile face. It has the front paws of a lion and the back end of a hippopotamus.
Actually, it's the head of a hippopotamus, and then the rest is right, but then the tail of the crocodile. But you're probably thinking of Sobket. Sobket is the crocodile god.
Oh,
Yeah.
So very interesting.
well, I don't know. I was just told it's Amit. So if Amit is what you just described,
God, yeah.
then
Yeah.
all the pieces are right, just in the wrong spots.
There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. And there's a lot of rabbit holes, a lot of stories, myths, a lot of things. So take this with a grain of salt. This is just what I know. By all means, I don't know as much as I should, but somebody just getting into it, it's enough to drive you crazy or get you more into a rabbit hole, get more books, read more YouTube, watch more YouTube things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's
very interesting.
So another thing is, Thoth, one of the names. So the Greek name is Thoth or Thoth or Toth, which is associated with thought. The Greeks love to associate things with thought, consciousness, identity, so forth. But the actual name of Thoth was Tehuti or Dewati, and Dewati was the underworld itself. So his name was Dewati. So
Tehuti or Juti or Dwati were, I believe, the African names, correct?
No, they're the Egyptian names. Tehuti was actually his nickname that the mother god Hoth, the wife of Ra, gave him. But Terra, the original, so you have Nun and Nunet, the primordial gods, and then you have Terra. Nun and Nunet and Terra actually gave him the nickname as well because he was much like the ibis bird, and he was always curious, and so they said the
dig
Tehuti,
deep into the mug to
Tehuti.
get the
And Dewati is associated with Tehuti because he was one of the underworld gods, and in fact Thoth was born in the primordial waters, much like Ra was. Ta.
Wasn't he the brother of Marduk?
Marduk? No.
Wow, fascinating. Like you're saying,
was he the Roman god Mercury and the Greek god Hermes as well? Hermes Trismegistus?
So that's what a lot of people associate,
Emerald
because
tablets and all.
The Egyptians, if you actually, for instance, the emerald tablets. So the early Egyptians, believed that Thoth so Horus was the reincarnation of Thoth. And that's why when his eye, like his left eye, was taken out by Set, in the actual, the written word, in the Egyptian word, where the story is that Set's eye was taken out, or Horus's eye was taken out by Set, it says that Thoth killed it, or Tehuti, right? Dewati. But it was actually, in the actual context, he came forth and realized who he was, and he healed his own eye. So it wasn't Thoth, like another person. And that's what gets mistaken in Egyptian mythology a lot, or Egyptian history, is the different gods and the different chronology of the gods. So people see it as like, oh, well, it's this person and this person. But a lot of times it's actually, for instance, Horus the Older and Horus the Younger is actually the same being. It's just a reincarnation of Horus, much like how Pharaoh Horus and Pharaoh Ra was actually supposed to be the reincarnation of the actual god Ra or the actual god Horus. So if they identified themselves as Pharaoh Ra or Pharaoh Horus, it was the reincarnation of those two gods. Whereas if they called themselves, for instance, you have
distinctively.
Yeah. You have like that one god.
So the Amun-Ra was...
The Amun-Ra was...
which pharaoh was that one?
That was Ra.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. So Nefertum is actually also perceived by the Egyptians as being the actual... So another thing is...
I wonder if you get nepotism from that.
Nepotism?
Because they were married.
Phonetics?
No, well, they were married, brother and sister. Just going down another rabbit hole. Personal
all day.
But anyways, like the Nefertum, so you have Ta. Ta is a different god, and then you have Capri. Capri, of course, is the beetle that rolled up the sun, right? Capri was an ancient god of darkness that actually helped give birth to the seed of Ra, which was the sun itself. And what was believed is that in the island of Ta, which was the first part of the underworld, and of course the Great Island, the flower, the lotus flower, is Nefertum. So it's Ra as a young god. So when he first came forth from the sun. So when he was first born, and the way that you can see that is actually the birth of the consciousness into different dimensions, rather than it actually being a different person. It's actually him being born into different dimensions, much like the actual the levels of the underworld, the 7 or 9 levels of the underworld. It's the birth of his different forms. So Nefertum was the first incarnation of him in the dark waters. Amun Ra is the sun coming from the flower.
Got all that from that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The 9 levels of hell.
Yep, he did. Well, it's the same thing. So, like in, for instance, in Samaria and the Akkadians and the Mesopotamians, the levels of hell were the same. Much like the Hopi, they have the same levels of hell. You have the underworld, which is Tartarus in the dark realm, and then you have all the 7 layers of hell, and then you have the upper layers of hell, and then it's the same with heaven. There's a 9 and 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that origin that you're referring to, is that back to the Sumerians and Anunnaki, or is this pre-Sumerians?
So the
Sumerian tablets, from what I understand, are the ones that mention the Anunnaki by name.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, and that was 6,000 years ago, or 5,800 years ago, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if anything was pre that, other than we could jump into the fact that different that man was also seated by different planetary systems, the Pleiadians, Sirius, Arcturians, all these, Draco and all that, and cultivated, and then you get into the 4.5 billion years where that aspect goes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as the earth is concerned, but then as far as man is concerned, then the seeding of man was more of a couple 300,000 years maybe.
So is there some of this, let's call it mythology or historical data?
I think that was more historical.
More historical.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence of this to be actually truth, or is it just based on myth?
Well, there's actually a New Science magazine that had an article where they found a jaw bonus that was of a Homo sapien, I think, or maybe even pre that, but was still man, bipedal, type of thing. I don't know what you call them before it's Neanderthal, but primitive. But about 300,000 years is what the carbon dating was detecting.
Right.
So,
mm-hmm.
And some other people have, through other means, I guess that they're all based everything off of that, the carbon 14 or 12 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Carbon 14.
And so, like in today's world, in modern day society, do any of those origins, those stories, correlate to any major religions, or do they correlate to, like we're referring to at the dollar bill? Is any of those stories become a foundation that we know of anything today's world?
As far as I know, many of the organized religions have stories in them that are repetitive, that repeats itself, that originally in the cuneiforms of the Sumerian tablets that talk about the Anunnaki. They also talk about a catastrophe such as a flood. They also talk about a person who was told to build a vessel, an ark, or what we know as an ark, but some vessel to bring other people and animals and plant life, because it was going to happen. And then the people, which were like which are actually like Enlil and Enki, as far as I know, of the Anunnaki. In this case, um, and Enlil was the one that didn't want to tell anybody, just wanted it to all happen. He just wanted to wipe out. Apparently, Enlil was kind of like the bad guy, and Enki was the good guy, if there was such a good brother, bad brother type of a thing.
Right.
But Enki felt sorry a little bit, and he whispered he didn't tell any, because Enlil said, "You promise not to tell anybody," and he says, "Yes, I promise not to tell anybody." So he asked this one guy, can't remember his name, to go to a certain place, and then he talked behind a veil. I'm talking to the wall, but you're over here and you can hear me. There's this thing happening. What am I supposed to do? He's talking to himself,
Right.
knowing that the other person's there. So he's not telling that person. He's just telling somebody else. So he's keeping his promise. He didn't tell a person.
Right.
But because of that, this guy, who we now know, or we come to believe in the different religions, as Noah and the flood, and he did the same thing. So there's that story that is also in I think it's called the Lineage, which is part of the Sumerian tablets. But
would that be in reference to like Gilgamesh?
Gilgamesh is also in there, and then there's some other things. I haven't read a lot of it. I've been told, I know enough to know that this is where the references lead me to these places. So I talk to people like Chris, and then I find out that, oh, have you checked out the Sumerian tablets? And I go, oh, no. So I check out the Sumerian tablets, and but I haven't really checked it out,
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's endless.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you'd have to have a lot of time on your hands.
They say it's like
a lot of rabbit holes.
40,000 tablets.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, they found the archaeology behind it was just immense. Basically, a library underground.
And I think it all started, as far as the translation goes, it started with that, they call it the Rosetta Stone. And from that, they were able to learn how to translate all cuneiform things. They were just like, it's like clay tablets that stamped some kind of left an impression. You had something that you imprinted something, and it would make some kind of a mark, and however that mark was, it would represent more or less like hieroglyphics, would depict certain stories by a picture or pictographs and that kind of such. So, and then this Rosetta Stone allowed people to learn how to translate, and that's how they got. And I believe some of them, or at least the Lineage, the Gilgamesh, and another one, are in the British Museum somewhere.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Go check it out.
Go check it out. I mean, like you're saying, these rabbit holes just kind of keep getting deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And we almost had to start creating this foundation, because like we started talking about Osiris being the son, or actually the father of Horus in general sense, correct? And so it's kind of building this foundation of almost, it stems like world religions that we have today, almost, or the origin lies there, correct?
Yeah.
On some of the mythology. Yeah.
I would say
so
yes.
Very, very cool.
Well, when Osiris became, so like, about the resurrection of Horus or Heru, right? But later on is when Osiris actually became the father of Horus, because they were born to the progeny were born to their ancestors. It's like the hearts of the father to the children, the charts of the children to the fathers. Was a literal reference in the Bible to reincarnation. But so Osiris, the original Horus, so the predecessor of Horus, the older, Horus was, of course, he was Thoth at one point in the dark realm, the darker realm, the moon god. And then he became Horus was actually born to Hoth, or sorry, not Hoth, Sekhmet and Ra.
Okay.
And then after his death later on, he was then born to Osiris in a later time.
Oh.
Yeah. So like if you actually look at the myths and put them together, because there's so many myths.
So that's why there's so many myths, is because they all happened similarly at different times.
Yeah. But if you look at it in context, then you can actually say, oh, because it doesn't make any sense that there are so many different versions of the story of Horus, because and the archaeologists are like, well, the way that they see it is, oh, it's this region, this kingdom, and there's different regional myths. But if you actually look at it in context, it's actually the progression of a god, much like the progression of a Ra, the progression of Thoth, the progression
ancestral
of Osiris.
Just the lineage.
It's a lineage, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah,
But the lineage is the actual incarnations.
The
So
reincarnations.
yeah, all the different ones. So so the soul of Ra, when it departed into the heavens, it went into the next Ra version.
Mm-hmm.
And then that departed, went to the next Ra version, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can look at it as levels, much like the levels of the underworld, the levels of consciousness as a new form of being.
And I think that's probably where we're going to take it for right now is consciousness. And so that's kind of the key to it all, right? Is that we're all here on Earth to evolve in consciousness.
I think to raise our consciousness.
To raise our consciousness. Energy, frequency, and vibration is obviously,
Tesla's words.
369. And we're going to leave it right there. Seth, I really appreciate you coming out.
Sure.
And obviously, Chris, having you to contribute to this amazing conversation that just leads to the next rabbit hole. So stay tuned. This is Alden Antonucci with Extreme Power Hour Podcast.